Firstly, good afternoon, everyone. It is a real privilege and a pleasure for me to be with you today. More importantly, because this particular theme is absolutely central if we're going to translate the ambitions we have for our sector into a sustainable reality on an upward trajectory. We've got really distinguished panel members with some wonderful perspectives to share, but I want to spend a few minutes setting the context for our discussion that will take us up to 3 o'clock. And you'll see that I've chosen a deliberately provocative title to try to highlight the urgency of this issue. Now, before we go into the discussions, I just want to explain a little bit more in line with what Chris talked about this morning about the UK Space Agency and about championing space, what it's about. Firstly, in the reorganisation of the agency, we now have 3 fundamental priorities. Catalysing investment, and we're doing that so we can deliver our missions and capabilities. And then we've got championing space mentioned there as well. So what is it all about? So my directorate is the second largest in the agency, and it brings together 5 separate, distinct teams. Yes, there is the Education and Future Workforce team and the Communications and Engagement team. But there's also the Parliamentary and Public Affairs team that's working with ministers, supporting public inquiries, etc., and the International Policy team and the ESA team at the agency. And as you all know, 69% of the United Kingdom's civil space budget goes into our ESA programs, which then flows back into championing space and then throughout the agency. And the reason why those teams have come together is because those teams within championing space are critical enablers for everything that the agency is doing. And I wanted to explain that because the skills and education and future workforce stuff that we are doing in the agency and that we are doing in the sector, that is a critical enabler for us to be able to deliver on our aspirations. We've heard this morning about the ambitions for the future. We know that this is the most exciting but the most challenging time in space since the 1960s. But if we are to go on the trajectory we want, then skills provision and our strategies are a key bottleneck issue going forwards for the future. Now, I'm talking about that in quite stark terms, but I do want to celebrate the successes that we've had to date. The last time it was my privilege to be able to speak here at RALSpace, the UK's national space laboratory, was 9 years ago on this issue. And since then, we have seen programmes like the UK Space Education Office. We've seen programmes like the National Space Academy that I was involved with setting up and leading expand to fully national and international programmes. We've seen the development of degree and higher level apprenticeship programmes. We have seen an order of magnitude increase in strategic prioritisation and funding of this issue, not just within the agency, but within STFC and other entities as well. So there's been a lot to celebrate, and I think nothing brings that to my mind more clearly than earlier this year. In fact, it was last month when one of the distinctive new programs that was established by Loughborough College and the National Space Academy, the Space Engineering course, as a hybrid academic vocational program, this was winner of the UK's highest national honour for further and higher education, the Queen's Anniversary Award for 2023. So lots of successes, but we cannot be complacent. We cannot tread water. Many of you will be aware that earlier this year, the UK Space Agency commissioned and has now published the Space Skills Survey report. So getting hundreds of responses from individuals, from academia, and critically from industry on the challenges that they are seeing in terms of skills provision and the skills issue. And the messages are stark. Now, I want to share them with you to frame the discussion. You can download the report whenever you want. I want to frame them with just 3 slides to illustrate some of the points. And the first one is this. It's a beautiful data set that we got from NASA Goddard about 4 years ago. And in terms of the science on this, I mean, what I love about this is that we've taken meteorological satellite imagery taken from geostationary orbit, digitally subtracted the cloud cover, introduced the data sets, again, from other visual platforms on nucleation sites for water vapor. So you've got smoke, you've got dust off the Sahara and sea salt. And you can see that conveyor belt of Atlantic hurricanes that we get. I think this is from 2017. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is because one of the big issues that's really confronting us is about our computational capability. Because 15 years ago, we would not have been able to produce data sets like this. We are now in an era where, to make best use of the data sets we have, and I'm not going to conflate all of these areas together, but we need to have so much more applicability of machine learning techniques, quantum computation we heard about earlier today, supercomputer capabilities. You know, you can see the computational fluid dynamics that's gone into that data set. And what we are hearing from our sector is that this is a crunch point. Not only are we not getting enough of the people with these skill sets coming into our sector, very often we're competing with many other sectors that are drawing them in with more lucrative offers. We can no longer rely on the idea that space is a trope that's just going to draw people in. We've got to be far more proactive because we're in a competitive jobs market. So that's one of the first challenges that I wanted to highlight. The second one, I want to use this image to illustrate. I'm going to go through two countries that I've had the privilege of working with for many years, talk about what they're doing and talk about how they've approached skills. So this is one of the most astonishing images that I've ever seen. This was China's Tianwen-1 mission. This selfie was taken by the Zhurong rover on the surface of Utopia Planitia in the summer of 2021. China's first ever mission to Mars, an orbiter, a rover, and a lander. Now, we know China's ambitions to move forwards in space. They identified that strategically, and they threw everything, including the kitchen sink and so much resource financially, into having skills programs that were sustainable and going to grow to future-proof them along that trajectory. And we know what their future goals are. Closer to home geographically, the United Arab Emirates, having worked with the UAE Space Agency for the last 10 years, just wanted to highlight this about how they're translating their ambitions into reality. We've just had their first astronaut returning from an extended mission on the ISS, Sultan Al Nayadi. There he is on their EVA. I fully expect to see one of their other astronauts, Noura Al-Matroshi. I expect to see her in lunar orbit in the late 2020s, because the UAE had big ambitions in space across all of the ecosystems, astronomy, exploration and satellite applications, but critically threw their resource into the skills architectures that will be necessary to facilitate that. And of course, on the international side, more broadly, what's coming out of the Space Skills Survey is this challenge of, if we have overseas workers coming into the UK, what are the barriers for them to come in? And these are major challenges that we need to be thinking about as well. And then the final point, before we open up the panel discussion, I wanted to share with you this self-image of the United Kingdom Space Agency workforce. So this was taken last month at our agency away day. In fact, it was right at the end of October, just outside the new EXAT Conference Centre. And I wanted to share this with you because of something else that has emerged from this morning. Look at my fellow colleagues that I am really privileged to work with. We've got what I would argue is the most diverse workforce in the United Kingdom space sector. We are pretty much 50% in terms of gender representation. We have got an ethnicity representation that is pretty much in line with UK figures. The latest census has said 20% of England's population are, quite frankly, people like myself, proud Europeans, proud Brits, but of non-European ancestry. And if we are to move forwards, we've got to make the roles that we have applicable and desirable to all elements of society. And I would suggest, looking at that space sector skills survey, that we still have, as a sector, a long way to go. So I've set the scene there for what I hope is going to be a really interesting and perhaps challenging discussion. The homework question that I set to my panel members had 4 key themes. I'm not going to read them through for you. You can see them there. But I hope that you're seeing a mixture of challenge for the future, but also some optimism, because what I hope we get to at the end is some sort of consensus of the approaches that we need to make sure that the increase in prioritization we've seen from government is not an ephemeral feature, but is a sustainable one that all of our stakeholders know is absolutely crucial for our future. So having set the scene, I'm delighted to welcome my panel members. What I've prepared them to do is to introduce themselves, to tell a little bit about their stories, and then I've asked each of them to start the discussion to pick one of these ideas to give their perspectives on it. And I haven't told them whether they need to be on the optimistic side or on the pessimistic, more challenging side. So I'd like to start with Dr. Alex Brown at the end. Alex, over to you.
Oh, I picked the wrong seat, didn't I? I should have been in the middle. Right, I'm Alex Brown. I work for STEM Learning, and I run the European Space Education Resource Office, ESERO-UK, as well as some of our enrichment activities called Destination STEM. So the whole point of what we're trying to do at STEM Learning is, we always say we're trying to build a world-leading STEM education, which is great, but what does world-leading mean? And why are we doing this? So we do this essentially because a world-leading STEM education is one that provides students with all the knowledge that they need to thrive when they leave school, but also with the experiences that they have there. We all know, and I'm sure if I talk to all of you, you will have times, you will be able to pinpoint a time in your education where that turned you on to what you're doing today. That the reason you're doing this is something probably to do in your education, or at least it didn't put you off enough not to do it. Let's put it that way. For me, it was my physics teacher, but a lot of the work that we were doing with my physics teacher was actually outside of the curriculum. It was because he let me come in at lunchtimes to do physics experiments. I realized that cast me in a very particular light, and I'm happy to live up to that one. We want all students to have that. It shouldn't rely on one teacher who really took an interest in a student. So we support teachers by offering them CPD. So this is about really professionalizing teachers, but also supporting them to be professionals, to make sure that their knowledge is up to date, and also they have an understanding of the careers. We're asking teachers to come straight from university in many cases and to know exactly what the space sector is doing, exactly what's going on in pharmaceuticals. It's too much. Yeah, we need to be there, and we need to support them as a sector. The other thing that we do is we offer skills and opportunities to engage with activities. So we do stuff like the CANSAT competition. We run this as a national competition supported by the UK Space Agency. And I would say, if you ever want a really humbling moment to come and talk to CANSAT students, they're all between 14 and 18, and they already know an incredible amount of information, and they already really are driven. That is essentially what we do. We support teacher knowledge, we support students with opportunities, and we work in disadvantaged areas, and we work to place disadvantaged students into research placements with professionals. Those are the three things we do, and we hope to do that to raise their capabilities. Now, I promised myself that if I was picked on first, if I went first, I would be positive. And I want to be positive because I think we're doing some really good things. On behalf of the UK Space Agency, we run something called the Space Inspirations Programme. This is about getting volunteers. There's always hecklers, that's fine. This is about getting volunteers from the space sector to go in and talk to young people. And so far, we've encouraged, I think it's one, I'm very conscious my team is up there who can shout down the real numbers, but I'm not going to. We've encouraged, during the year, we've helped facilitate 1.9 million. So if you're a space ambassador, get out there, because I do not want to give Anu a report that says 1.9 million. It's got to be 2 million for this year. Anyway, we support them to do that. And we've got 1,000 members of the space sector who are going in regularly to schools to work with students. This is fantastic. I've looked at the data on the STEM Ambassador platform. This is the biggest single sector organization and sector volunteer group within that platform. This is great, and we should applaud it. But that doesn't mean we can't do more. 1,000 people is hardly any compared to the rest of the wider number of people we've got working within the sector. So we can do more, but I would say we've got passionate and really committed people. We've got and I'm not just saying this because he's next to me. We've got the agency. There are very few branches of government really truly supporting the skills agenda for their particular sector. And I think that is a huge benefit for us. I'm going to be quiet now and hand over.
Thank you very much, Alex. Mansi, over to you.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to be here today. I'm Mansi Joshi. I work as an aerothermal engineer for Rolls-Royce in Defence Aerospace, and I'm also a National Space Academy and Loughborough College Space Engineering course alumni. So I was part of the course in the second year it was running, so quite a while ago now. And after that, I went on to do my Masters in Aerospace Engineering, and that's where I am today. So I work for Rolls-Royce. It was really through the National Space Academy when I was there, and through the support, as Alex said, of my physics teachers, of which Anu was one of them, that I really widened my outreach. So I was supported by the Space Academy to run some workshops for local scout groups to get younger women involved in STEM. And sort of started out working in STEM outreach for underrepresented minorities, mainly women, young girls, and just trying to raise that awareness of this is a career that you might be able to get into. Moving on from there, I sort of continued my outreach work at university, where this spread more into widening participation, into underprivileged communities that don't have a history of moving on into higher education, and what we might be able to do to just raise that awareness, really. It's not about forcing someone into a career, it's about giving someone the knowledge to know that they have that option to go into that. And yeah, since then, throughout my work as well, I've just been involved more in STEM work, and also now sort of using my experiences to influence strategy and, what we can do moving forward to help the younger generation get more involved and included in STEM. So I think maybe similar to Alex, I think it's very easy to say, this is what we're not doing right, or this is what we really need to be doing more of. But to start with, I really want to focus on what we are doing well. And having lived through that experience of going through the space engineering course, the awards that it's won last month, I'm no surprise that things and educational initiatives like that target underrepresented minorities, that really give them the platform and the opportunity to develop and take that step forward, are what's really working. Myself and lots of my other space engineering colleagues as well are examples of people that have, young people that have lived through that experience. And I can very easily say that had I not gone through that experience, I wouldn't be in a place like this doing STEM outreach. Potentially might not have even chosen a career in engineering. So initiatives like the space engineering course that are really developed to target people that potentially might not have chosen that as a first choice, or maybe weren't confident enough in their decisions, or maybe didn't have the right support and guidance around them to be able to make those decisions, are really, really important. And I think that's what I think is doing well. There's always lots more that can be done, but that's what I wanted to start on. And that's why I'll pass on to Helen.
Hi everyone, so I'm Helen Johnson. I head up the STFC Skills Centre here on site, covering all of our sites across the UK. So the Skills Centre has developed out of an idea that came around from Anu probably about 3 or 4 years ago, around something that we called at the time the Skills Factory, which was a bold ambition to overtrain, over-recruit, to work with SMEs, to encourage SMEs to think about early careers, apprentices and graduates in particular, and feed the UK PLC with technologists, engineers, computer scientists. STFC has absolutely seen the value in that, and this is where the Skills Centre has come from. So we've pulled together all of our early careers cohorts. We're one team now. We work together. I've got a team of coordinators who run the programmes day to day, and we also have project leads that work on various skills projects as they come along, or as we see that we need to do them. So it really is bringing together all of the early careers cohorts, making them feel like a cohort, making them understand what each other does, how it all interlinks together, which is a really fantastic place to be. Some of the projects we're working on, so we're piloting placements with small and medium companies on campus at the moment to see how that works, what kind of appetite there is for that type of placement with our apprentices and graduates. We're also looking at the 10K intern foundation programme and bringing some interns in for next summer, and hopefully that will feed into our pipeline as well. We're making sure that ED&I is absolutely intrinsic in everything that we do, making sure that it's embedded in what we do, so that we bring that diverse cohort through. The young people come through as a very diverse cohort. We're also working on quantum-enabled apprenticeships. So we're working with the government around a project to think about, actually on the apprenticeship front, how can we make them quantum-enabled? It's obviously one of the things that's coming down the track for us all, So how do we embed that within the apprenticeship schemes that we've got at the moment? And we also do a lot of outreach work as well. One of the major programmes within the Skills Centre is our Early Careers Engagement programme. We ask all of our cohorts that come through to deliver 3 days of either public engagement or schools engagement, and that works really well. Not only does it help in terms of our recruitment and encouraging young people to think of us for recruitment, but it also helps to all of those people to think about, actually, STEM is a subject that I can take. You know, STEM is a place that I can go and work. I can go and work at Harwell. You know, I don't need a white coat. I don't need a PhD. There are other routes into this organisation. So I was going to start with all the good stuff, of which I've got a list. But one of the things that actually struck out to me in terms of the skills survey was one quote that was in there was around, you know, apprenticeships can't work for me because my company's too small. And my question is, why is that? Why are we not hearing what those issues are and those problems? So that would be my main thing in terms of, we need to go and listen to the companies and understand the challenges. Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. John.
Hi, yeah, I'm John Hetherington. I've got that tickly cough that gets worse when you talk. It's ideal for a panel session. I work in UK Space Command, so I'm a military officer. My responsibilities cover the workforce, so building the UK Space Command workforce, which has been pretty much done from scratch over the last 2.5 years. I have responsibility for training, so I've got training officers that do our training development, training needs analysis, design our courses, and work on the Defence UK Space Academy. Responsibility for engineering, that's cyber communications and safety and in-service capability management, so managing the in-service capabilities we have and bringing those new capabilities in safely. Also responsible for RAF filing Dales, so the operations team work for the operations lead, and then the station itself I run in terms of all of the support services on a unit, and then finally business support in the headquarters itself. My team is a pretty good example of that diversity that was spoken about earlier, and I mean diversity in its total sense. So diversity to me means not only visible diversity, but it might mean the colour of uniform you wear. I've got Army, Navy, Air Force all under my team, all who bring a different approach because of their different service backgrounds. I've got civil servants and contractors as well within the team, and again they bring a different set of ideas and a different approach to problem solving, and have all got very different backgrounds too. And pretty much none of them are what I would call space experts. I'm certainly not. I came to this job with a background running airfields, maintaining runways, and various other jobs throughout my service career. And then Space Command was set up, and it goes back to that inspiration piece. It sounded like an exciting thing to be part of, and I'm finding that when building that workforce is that people want to be a part of Space Command because space excites. And through that, I've had the privilege of doing some of our space training courses. So I'd consider myself to be a sort of a space semi-professional now, in that I kind of know where it is. But the point is, the expertise in my team is communication engineers, and it's people are experts in safety, people are experts in designing training courses, people that are experts in project management. They're the skill sets that we need, and we need those skill sets in space, and then we give them space education. And it's interesting when I work with the Americans, the difference that they apply to space education and space training, and they're a bit more defined in that than we are in the UK military. Education is seen as concepts, and understanding orbital mechanics, understanding how SATCOMs work, understanding space weather, and training is training people to use a piece of equipment to do a job. We're quite good at the training part, so we train our people to operate and do space domain awareness. We do that in-house. We don't need to recruit them with those skills. And then we are quite good at doing that generic space operational awareness. I think our courses are quite good at that. But we need to develop a better understanding of what are those wider training and educational needs we need for our own workforce. But also, we can't do anything we want unless the wider UK skills agenda is met, because we rely on all of the people in this room probably to develop capabilities that we're then going to use, or to give us the expertise we need in order to deliver our operational output. So, I'll do what are we doing wrong, I suppose, just to be slightly negative. I actually think we've kind of forgotten the basics sometimes, and this is not to go back to the 1990s when I joined the Air Force, but I do think what people still value is a well-paid job, with prospects, the ability to improve yourself that's enjoyable, that you feel is important and is adding value in some way, that's secure, so you know that you've got a secure role, that's challenging, and it provides you with through life education and personal development. I kind of think if you tick all of those boxes, you've got a good chance of recruiting people and attracting them and maybe even retaining them. I'm not saying all those things are easy, because they're not, but I kind of think that's, we do need to remember that the basics are that, and then everything else that you build from there. But this isn't a challenge for all Western nations. I mean, it's quite clear when I go to the US and talk to their training establishments and education establishments, they have exactly the same issue. So it's not unique to the UK. So what is it within, I say, Western society that we need to address, even if it's not more globally? And I can't speak for India and China, and maybe you can, I know a little bit more in a bit more detail, but yeah, I think the basics are important.
Thank you. They run out of lapel mics. Having to hold one. I'm CJ Bishop from the National Space Centre. I'm the Community Engagement Manager, and I've been there now for 4 years, just over 4 years. The role came, is that too loud? Okay. The role came about thanks to the Inspiring Science Fund, which was about £2 million that wanted to see a community engagement programme, developed kind of an immersive lab digital art suite, 16 computers, post-16 program similar to the National Space Academy, and a brand new exhibition in the gallery space at the National Space Centre. Upon consultation of this, it was evident that the National Space Centre had a disconnect with the local communities, and that's why they wanted to engage. However, locally, we do have a 60 or 70-year space heritage, thanks to the University of Leicester. So we went out and we connected with these young people, and I put together an after-school program for 7 to 12-year-olds using library and community spaces, primarily in areas where it was high deprivation, low socio-economic backgrounds, etc., and typically audiences that wouldn't want to engage with space or STEM generally. We invited those families after 6 weeks to the National Space Centre for a family celebration, and it was, over 60% had never visited before. But you'll be speaking with the parents, and they'll be saying things like, I wondered what was in there. So what are we doing after 20 years that doesn't connect with our local communities? Anyway, 4 years down the line, we're now seeing young people transition from year 7 to year 10 and 11. We're seeing some of those year 11s come back to our program and support as a volunteer, which is great. We've initially started reaching 2,500 in year 1. We then reached 3,500, 5,000, 7,000, and now next year we're going into reaching 10,000 engagements. What we're now able to do is actually retain some of those members, so measure those engagements. So we track multiple engagements, which is 3 or more interactions. We've got some young people that are on 30, 28, and we can also see the hours as well and what type of intervention that we're giving them. My program goes typically up until the age of 14. We do Saturday Physics Club for year 9s and year 8s. And then we do a family careers day, because what you can find is school-age children will have an interest in something. They'll go to a careers day. That's great. But if you've not got that family support back at home, then it can be fizzled out a little bit. So we try and bring parent along as well, and we try and support that navigation into that sector if they are interested. So when we are getting these young people up until year 8, year 9, then what? There's this gap. Are we influencing their GCSE option? Are we supporting their post-16 option? Yes, there's a pathway, but I'm not going to see you for 3 or 4 years. And actually what we're needing now and wanting is actually support from academia and industry. Is what does the future look like, and how can we shape our delivery based on the needs of the future? And that's where we are on that. And across the country, there's lots of great work happening, to name a few. So we've got the ASDC, which is the Association for Science and Discovery Centres, composing of 60 science centres across the UK. They deliver STFC science, reaching tens of thousands of individuals and family members. We've got STEM learning that work with ESERO and with ESA. We've got the National Space Academy delivering the Space to Learn programme that reaches 45,000 deprived children in secondary age. We've got the community engagement program at the National Space Centre. We've got JET as well, that's working with young people. And all this is great. but it's actually how do you somehow combine that and work together and share that data collectively so that actually there is this almost pathway of opportunity. There's this standard, we can quality assure it. When I'm going to use Paul Bates, it's a good mention today, Paul Bates in sports, just once. But again, if we use that sporting analogy, we look at podium sports, there's a pathway on how to achieve that. There's a gold standard. If we look at sports academies, football teams, there's always team 1, team 2, team 3, and so on. There's a way in there. And I think as a space sector, if we are to unify and to level up, so to speak, then actually we somehow need to put these young people on a trajectory of a pathway that actually we know is quality assured, and as practitioners, we can deliver for you. So I think that's probably the optimism bit, I hope.
Thanks very much. What struck me from all of those perspectives is, if we want to be sustainable in what we're doing, then it's not just outreach. You need differentiated, focused programs that are going all the way from traditional preschool through formal education to professional development, maybe for people coming from outside the sector coming in. It's got to be sustained. It's got to be prioritized. And what we've heard shared are lots and lots of evidence that this works. So my challenge, before we open up to the audience members for questions, for anyone to take it, is how do we better get this evidence together in a way that's going to convince the policymakers at a time that we know is going to be challenging in the next sort of round of government spend. But allied to that, so there's the government side, but I'll let you choose between that and what CJ's just highlighted is the work that his programme has done, but a clear call for more academia involvement, a clear call for more industry involvement. So I'll just open up. What can we do to present our evidence better to government at a time of real restrictions, or how can we better encourage academia and industry to get involved in these programs that we've got evidence that they work? And I'll open this to anybody on the panel to answer before we take questions from the audience. Any volunteers? John.
I think the first thing I've noticed is that since I've come into Space Command and started working with you guys, really, is just how joined up we seem to be now in terms of defence, government departments, other agencies, and academia. The amount of interaction that I've had over the last 18 months has really surprised me in a really good way. And we all seem to be starting to cohere the message really, really well. So the message is starting to be cohered. I suppose then there's that challenge of how do you make the case from that. But I think the foundations are definitely there. That's what I've certainly taken away from the last 18 months to 2 years, is that there's a real feeling that we're all trying to pull in the same direction, which is not always the case, I don't think. Other experiences taught me sometimes you get people pulling in these different directions, which really undermines that case. So I think we're all set. It's just probably that final piece now is how do you cohere the message?
CJ, I'm just thinking, do you want to share very quickly before we open to questions the importance of working with local politicians as well? I'm thinking of that meeting we had with a local MP, but it seems to be having a disproportionate influence upwards.
Yeah, most definitely. And local MPs, they do have a voice. They are powerful. And I think through our local MP, what we was able to do, we was able to bring together school-age children, secondary, but also industry as well. And they want to give back to their community in parts of CSR, etc. But I believe what was the strongest part about that was we had 4 or 5 secondary schools where we was able to form a little bit of a sounding board, a consortium of what would you like from us as a National Space Centre? How can we deliver? What do your students need? What are the gaps? And I think with all the different pockets of work that's happening across the country, potentially there's an opportunity there for us to get together around the table to actually steer our direction of path, because we are going in the right direction. But actually, what are these quality assurance marks we want to see for those that are showing the most potential, by which we can then nurture through our programs and support their CVs or covering letters for post-16 and university, etc. To say, actually, they've been through this program and they've got X, Y, and Z. They're a big green tick for me. So I think a round table with practitioners and potentially academia and industry of what they would like from us on the ground.
Oh, Alex, very quickly.
Yeah, so just to build on the piece about us all being connected, I think you're right, but I do think one of the big challenges we have with this area that we have is we come out and talk to you as employers, as HEIs, and you say, yeah, but I need skills now. You're working with kids that are going to be in education, or they're going to be in education for what, 7 years, maybe 5, 6 years before they actually come to us. We need to be able to present a picture to government, but also to all of you that actually this is joined up. You know, we have a program of careers and skills that works all the way from primary all the way through to graduate or apprenticeship routes, because this is really important. You can't pick on any one single area, and we need to get better at being able to demonstrate to you as policymakers that there is a joined up approach taking place. We need to work together, but we also need to be able to evaluate how this is working. It's not good enough to do what we've done in the past and said, well, what's the social value of this work? That doesn't mean anything to an employer. That doesn't mean anything. We need to come out of this and say, this is how it's going to affect you in 5 years. This is how it's going to affect you in 10 years. Actually, this is how it's going to affect you in 6 months. We need to be much better than that. We need to present that as a really good offer to you.
Thanks very much, Alex. Aware of time, so probably got time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience before some final thoughts. Are there any burning questions? I can see one hand up here at the front. I think yours shot up. That's all right. We've got a question there and we've got a question here, I think. Probably got time for both of them. So I'm aware my field of view is probably a little bit better than people with a mic. So
thank you. And
in fact, I've got one here and one at the back as well.
Those really crucial questions. I think just to say, as well as the proactive approach and the multiple engagements, it is just to emphasise that there are hundreds of thousands of young people out there who they don't know yet that they're interested in space. So it is about that long term. We really need to help those young people at the right age know that this is for them, and those young people will be excited to go into the sector. And I think also just the Space Skills Survey highlighted so-called soft skills. So really interestingly, of course, there's all the technical skills that are needed, but so interestingly, the top skill was communication, and I think resilience, and teamwork and leadership. So I think the space sector has a real need for those soft skills, but also the space sector can help young people develop those soft skills. And let's face it, they're not soft skills, they're essential skills. So just to say, completely agree with all of that. And I think the Pathways model, how can we do what we do best and then work together, is just so pivotal. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma. We've got time for 2 questions. I see one hand there, and I see, I see a hand up there as well. And then we'll have our final thoughts, because I don't want to eat into the next session.
How does what we're doing in space compare with other STEM industries? How much do you look at what other sectors are doing? How much do you talk to them?
Anyone want to grab that? Or
I can say that defence is struggling to recruit, highly skilled people across the board, and I can't imagine that's not the same problem across all sectors, whether it's aircraft engineers, nuclear engineers. There is a shortage of skills, full stop, which, as I said earlier, I think is strategic in its nature across the US, Canada, UK, and all these like similar countries. Is a strategic issue that needs strategic investment and strategic strategy, and we're just one part of that.
Thank you. I've got time for a final.
Sorry, on that. All right is the one-word answer to that. It's better than some areas. It's worse than others, I would say. It's harder for space because you can't, if you get ill, you take medicine, you know roughly what you probably don't, but you know roughly what pharmaceutical industry do, right? It's much harder with space. We can say we walk around with a mobile phone, but people don't really think about GPS as a space thing. They think about the way to get from one place to another. We have to do better at doing that. That's where we fall down. We've got great support. A lot of sectors don't have that, but we're not good enough at actually going and making this about people's daily lives.
Yeah, too often, I think we're in our own echo chamber sometimes, and we need to be much more proactive. It was a very short question at the back. We've got time for one more.
Yeah, it was very similar, so I've made up another one. Sorry. It was just to say, to Helen's point about some companies say we want to support, we want to kind of help, but we have challenges. How should their voices be heard? Who should they be talking to? Do they ask questions in this forum? Who's collecting that? How do we ensure that that's collected, and then we can help kind of break down those barriers, so we can kind of help them take on more apprenticeships or involve in other STEM activities?
I would say it needs to be asked in every forum to gather every information, so that everybody has a chance to have their voice heard, and feed it up through whatever routes there are. STFC as an organisation can feed up the campus thoughts. Other organisations will have feed in from their different different areas. So yeah, I would say it can't just be one size fits all, or one questionnaire resolves the question. So yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you to panel members for sharing your perspectives. I just want to leave last thoughts to Mansi, and this is in line with the comment that was made earlier that, you know, most of us in this room, we're what I think of as 20th century citizens, because yeah, we're in 2023, but it was the 20th century technological landscape that shaped our way of thinking. And I think on the panel, you and possibly CJ, not sure at the moment, I would say that you definitely, Mansi, and maybe CJ as well, you're really the 21st century citizens amongst us. But as a student who's come through a system like this and now working the sector, just 30 seconds, any final things you want to highlight or calls to the space community that you have here, Mansi?
Yeah, thanks, Annie. I think I just want to echo the point of, you know, the like, as Emma said, actually, there's hundreds and thousands of students that are potentially not aware about the industry, are aware and don't know how to get involved. I think my plea would just be to look around you. There's always, you know, bigger and better things you could be doing. But I think what is the most impactful is having that one person that you've helped and knowing that you've made that difference. So there's always people around you that you can help, especially younger people who are trying to get their foot into the industry, and any way you can support them. I think CJ mentioned, you know, if you don't have that family support, it's extremely difficult. So yeah, just try and take young people under your wing. There is a skills shortage right now. Alex mentioned that young workforce is not going to be, you know, ready to recruit straight away, but in 5 or 10 years' time, that's when you'll see the impact. And hopefully at that point, that's when you'll know that you've made the difference to the industry. So yeah, that's my 30 seconds.
No, thank you very much, Mansi. And could we all show our thanks to our panel members who've given up their time? Thank you very much.